I encourage you not to pick your nose if you share your picture, though. I think last time we had some lady, she did that, I guess, and entertained my crowd. So we don't want that happening today. So anyway, aside from that, we're going to have some fun. I just want to really make it real for you. And so let's tell them just a little bit about us other than what happened to us over the time. And Jason doesn't get to talk a lot in the beginning because I met him along the way, right? He's part of my process, and he's a result of what happened. And so anyway, so he basically, now we are married. We've been married almost 20 years, and March 6th will be our 20th anniversary.
Quick, very quick.
And so we are real estate. I'm a real estate broker, agent, real estate investment coach. We're coaches. We coach people nationally, realtors, and we coach investors nationally on building wealth. In addition to, when we are home in Southwest Florida, we help our clients build wealth with real estate. We're going to share a lot about ourselves. I think you'll get an idea for who we are by the time we're done. And like I said, feel free to share with us where you're from in the chat. If you do, I can actually maybe play some of the, sometimes I can twist things according to the state that you live in, that kind of a thing. But what I'm going to do is get into my story. And back in the, I guess it was the early 90s, my story was, one second. Okay, here we go. So we'll start. So let's do this, Jason. Let's just tell them, I'll backtrack now. We're going to tell them a little bit about us. We've, like I said, been married about 20 years, and we've got 3 kids between us, Adam, Nick, and Jocelyn, and 2 grand boys, and they all live up north. And when I say where I'm from, Minnesota, you can hear that. And I've got a lot of Minnesotans on the call right now. And we did have a property that was featured on the Fine Living channel, Frank Lloyd Wright, Renovation, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that was a fun property.
Yeah, and I've always been a top agent, received a lot of awards, always sold a lot of property, and really am very strategic when it comes to real estate. Now the sun's really going to come in my eye here, but oh well. So I'm known as the go-to expert on how to buy, sell, rent properties, renovate. I own a real estate company. I own a property management company, manage vacation rentals, created a strategic venture with that in Southwest Florida with my son. That's going really well. And Jason is a licensed contractor and has a construction company as well. Been in the business about 31 years and done 3,500 deals. So I know how to make deals happen. And I'm real excited. I've got a book coming out. It should be out by now, but we delayed it. I've been working so hard with my coaching clients that I got a little sidetracked, and I haven't gotten it published yet. We want to do it in the right way. And so it's this story. You're getting the free, update on that right now, and I'll be sharing this story, how I took that $5,000 my grandfather left me to $6.5 million. My second book this year is Should You Rent It, Flip It, or Run? And that is a fun book. It's got avatars in it. So everybody has different goals. Everybody has different things they'd like to achieve in life, right? Whether it's with real estate or whether real estate is an avenue to help you create it. And so what I find is by sharing stories that are realistic in what's happened to other people, maybe I change the names to protect the innocent, you can learn from other people's endeavors and how to build wealth over time, because it's not a cookie cutter approach, and not every one approach works for any one individual. So with that, we love our kids, of course, and I think our dogs are locked up right now.
Hopefully they won't join in. Sometimes they do.
They do. So anyway, but our other loves in life, one of my big goals is to go spend a couple months at our cabin in Montana. We own some land on top of Livingston Peak. And
yeah, that's a great place to get away to, spend some time and relax.
But other than that, our love is helping other people achieve their goals with real estate. And that's what we hope to do with you guys today. So I'm going to give you access to my investing secrets and help you transform your life. And it will apply to anybody. I mean, you could be a realtor. I've got experienced realtors on the call right now. Or have you done just a couple properties? So what I'm hoping to do is save you years of trial and error, waste your money, keep you from being frustrated, and shortcut your way to real estate success. And so you might actually have a portfolio of properties. Sometimes I work with folks just on how to do their own principal residence. He's trying to get rid of that sun in my eye. And sometimes my clients have big portfolios, and we are just taking it to the next level. So it's not a cookie cutter approach that we use. A lot of people are looking to retire early. Maybe we want to leave a legacy. Maybe we have a philanthropic endeavor that we'd like to do. So real estate is a modality. I was an occupational therapist before I got in real estate a long time ago. And so I learned in college how to goal set and create ways, avenues to achieve goals. And that's what I do with my clients in real estate. So this is not for you if you're not committed to stepping out of your comfort zone. Not all of us, real estate is a very complicated deal. There's a lot of talent you have to do it. Few of us have everything, right? And so sometimes you have to learn something new. You have to be humble enough to say, I don't know this, and ask for help, right? So this is for you, though, if you realize that you're doing the same things are not going to get you what you want, or you've got to be willing to understand what market timing, I've got to move this out of my eyes a titch, what market timing and being able to understand what a market anomaly is and be able to identify those anomalies. You've got to know how to beat the tax man, because you know what, if you're successful in real estate and you make mistakes, then all you're going to do is pay him a lot of money. You must be dedicated to moving ahead with your business and be willing to be educated, and that way you can limit your expenses and follow a model, and that way you get somewhere a lot faster. Goodness, we have lots of people joining us. So this free training is for you if you're ready for a change. So with that, what I'm going to do, if you like these ideas, right, you want to shift from struggle to being in real profit with your real estate investment business, you want to avoid pitfalls, and you want to maybe find and be able to identify and use private or hard money for investing. Maybe you need some clarity about your goals, how to achieve your goals. I mean, I run into all these people. I mean, it's been hundreds of people. I actually almost every day I meet someone who's paid some coach $35,000 to $70,000, and their problem is again and again. We met, somebody. Even today, we talked to somebody, he'd spent a lot of money with coaching, and the whole thing is, how do you get into action today? What are the steps that you have to apply today? And so not a lot of people take a real personal approach to helping you, and that's really the difference between us and everybody else out there. So maybe you need to know how to evaluate and leverage your assets effectively. You're going to see how I did that, and it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? You got to be really careful. A lot of people make some big mistakes with that as well. Maybe you need to know about rehab loans. One big problem a lot of people have is that they only have so much cash. So how do you avoid eating your seed corn and using up all your cash? So what we do is we provide a one-to-one strategic approach with people to help them figure out what it is they need to do to get ahead in real estate. And so what I'm going to do this next 45 to 60 minutes is empower you and show you the techniques that I used when my grandfather left me $5,000 and I took it up to 100 rental units. I could have done more. I wish I'd known what I know now back then, but I'm sharing it with you, so I'm hoping you can take it to the top, right? I'm going to show you what market timing is. I didn't know it back then. I know it now. Apply it to this. You're going to do better, right? I'm going to show you about seed corn. That's my term on how I talk about your cash. I want to protect your cash. Most people just think it's easy and they want to spend your cash, right? I'm not going to do that. Goal setting, that is the big secret to success. Tax saving principles, you've got to be able to identify and profit from what I talk about. I coined market anomalies, right? And so I want us to start thinking in those terms. So be open to that. Write some of these things down so that they stay with you afterwards, right? And then you want to be able to, you don't want to be like all the other investors. A lot of people fail by year two, and a lot of times they don't reanalyze their investment, and therefore, they just kind of get a couple of deals going, and then that's it. And I'm going to share with you at the end, Jeff Worth of the Worth Companies. Those of you in Minneapolis, St. Paul know the Worth Companies. He shared at a seminar I went to many years ago, the secret to becoming a billionaire. And I'm going to give you his secret formula that he shared with me back then. So now, some of us, all of us have things that self-sabotage us, right?
Sure.
And so back then, I was a single mom. I was just about 30 years old. I wish I was anymore, but I'm not. And but I could have just been a single mom, and I could have said, how am I going to do this? I'm not getting any child support. He's not paying me anything. I've got to put these kids in daycare. How do I do this? I'm new in real estate. I need more experience. And actually, I did not know one single soul. I did not know one single soul that was buying any investment property at the time. Now, that is contrary to all of us today on the call, because we all know with the flip shows and everything else out there that there is a big craze about this. So we actually can get support. And you're getting support here right now. You couldn't even do that. There wasn't even the internet in those days. So with that, let's throw those excuses out and move on, and let's do something, right? So this is important now. And things I don't want you to accidentally eat your seed corn. I don't want you to use up all your cash. Most of us only have so much cash. And believe me, if you have lots of cash, I want to meet you. I want you to be my client, because that would make my job really easy. But not everybody has a lot of cash. You got to understand market timing. You can invest in every part of the market cycle, but you got to know what's happening, when and why and where, right? And you have to know before you read it in the paper. We don't even read it in the paper anymore. We hear about it on the internet, right? And online. You got to be willing to do some extra work. Otherwise, you will not get anywhere with this, and you'll waste your money, and you will not achieve your business dreams with this. But my promise to you is that I'm going to give you a step-by-step process to transform the way you invest in real estate. And if you want to build some wealth with real estate, whatever you want to do in life, real estate is a vehicle to help you get there. So I'm going to show you how it helped me. I'm not going to deliver any get-rich-quick scheme today. It just doesn't work, and I'm not going to give you one simple alternative in how to do it. A lot of people will just say, well, you don't have a lot of money, so you got to wholesale, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, real estate is a comprehensive thing, and you need a detailed plan that's going to work for you to get you what you want. And by telling my story, you're going to start to see what I'm talking about. So, like I said, you could use real estate to pay for college, pay off some debts, retire early, start a new business, buy a new house, buy new toys. You'll see where Jason did that later on. Not necessarily the best thing we ever did.
That's part of real estate.
Oh yeah, it was for him. I got lots of that. Anyway, you'll see in a few minutes, and you can start a business with your kids or your spouse, build a legacy, do philanthropic endeavors, like I said, and use it, like I said, for anything else that you want to. But how to get started? A lot of investors want to know these things. How do you get started? What's the best strategy? Who should you have on your team? How do I finance all of this, right? How do I find more cash? This is a really biggie. And how do I estimate the cost of renovating? Jason's really good at teaching you that. And what kind of offers should I make? Well, it kind of depends on the marketplace, if you're in a seller's market or buyer's market in that particular property, right? How to structure your deals. And really, is now a good time to invest in real estate? You'll see. I'm going to teach you a little bit about market timing as we go. I understand you want to have more cash, you want to give up your job, you want to know how to do returns on investment, cash flow, have good tenants, right? You want to have a good team, you want to be successful in real estate. So let's get to this, right? So I do have a free gift for you at the end, so stay tuned to the end. Other than that secret formula from Jeff Worth, I have that as well. But I do have another gift for you, so stay with me, and I'll give that to you at the end. But the real problem is really, really not what you think with real estate, right? So the real problem is 95, this is my opinion, 95% of the investors out there, and I've seen it time and time again, they stop investing just before, during, or just after their first deal. And they get stopped dead in their tracks because they don't really, there's a lot of mistakes that they make. You know, for example, they follow the guidance of unqualified mentors or professionals that you think know everything. Now, let me tell you, if someone has a real estate license, they do not know most of what I'm going to tell you. I love my realtors. They're online. They'll tell you too. Yeah, that we aren't taught this. It's not fair. What do they teach us as realtors? They teach us rules to follow. They don't teach us how to invest. They should. And sometimes we can take some classes, but unless you do on-the-job training, you're not going to really get it, right? Or people, what they try and do is they try to watch everything online like we're doing today. And, you know, people are trying to attract you, right? And then you go and apply one strategy. You know, you hear that you're supposed to do an LLC, or I'm supposed to go create this before I do this, but nobody really looked at your plan, right? And so if you start doing things willy-nilly, you might be wasting your time. People say, I got to pay off my credit before I buy a house. Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of different things that come into this. So make sure you know who you're getting advice from, right? So loan officers, realtors, for me, my ace loan officer for many years, Doreen Drake, some of you know Doreen, I went to every loan out for about 20 years. And she says, Terry, you're the only realtor that ever did that. And I did that because I wanted to be in control of the transaction. I didn't want to, I learned early on that when I just sent a client to any old loan officer, God love them, they gave them the programs that they had, but that person did not have every program. And you're going to see when I show my story why that's really important. Because if that person says this, and my goal is to buy a bunch of properties and they use up all my money, then I can't keep going. That's why people can only buy one property, right? But if I know all the plans out there and I figure out strategically which way, I can say, I want you to go to this loan officer because of this plan, and then come back to me in that way. And so realtors, we're doing a records results real estate agent certification, and our realtors will be able to do those kinds of things for our clients, so that because a lot of times I find people are told no, and then they actually can if we just figure out another way, right? It's just no from that person, right? Eating your seed corn, like I said before, the rehab project doesn't go according to plan, and it turns into a catastrophic loss, right? Lack of experience with tenants. Yeah, not all tenants are great, but you can minimize your risk depending if you follow a few simple strategies, right? So we're committed to you and your success. So here we go. All right. So after this, you're going to be able to identify you will be able to identify your dream and real estate goals and strategies to obtain, and be 100% control of your investment destiny by embracing proven knowledge and that virtually nobody else is talking about, right? Be able to act on and make progress with this. One second, my bells keep ringing in here. So this is great, guys. So, and I want you to understand strategic financing, market timing, market anomalies, like I've talked about before, and be able to calculate returns on investment. And you don't have to be rich to do this. Anybody can do it. You just have to get started, right? So with that, I want you to be tenacious. I want you to avoid problems and falls and continue learning these proven concepts, right? Surround yourself with like-minded, positive people, and you'll see why my success, I contribute a lot of my success to the people that I had around me, and those people are still around me today, because you can create some long-term relationships, and it's really interesting. So I want you to profit, make money by taking educated risk, not stupid risk, right? And I want you to follow a proven model and know that progress is really important, but not perfection. And we want to take bite-sized, actionable steps that lead to goal fulfillment, right? And so you can do that. Any goal is possible. Let me get to the next slide. So here's my story, right? Here's my story. So it started with me, my son, Adam, Nick, and I simply found myself getting divorced, and the year was about 1991. And I needed a place to live, and Jason, when I met him, he says, well, why wouldn't you have just rented a property? I'm like, well, if I'd rented a property, you know, my rent would have went out the window. So what I did, I was a new baby realtor. Anytime any agent is less than 4 years in the business, in a very loving way, I call you a new baby realtor. So I was a new baby realtor because you wake up after 4 years and you realize that it was a flipping college education that you learned if you did a bunch of deals during that first 4 years, right? So here I sat, new baby realtor, and I needed a place, but I couldn't get a loan because I was self-employed and I didn't have any support. So I found this brownstone on Summit Avenue. And those of you from St. Paul, the address is 797 Summit. And it sits adjacent to the F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, the F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote this side of paradise in this brownstone to the left, right? Actually, there's a plaque out front. The buses stop out front every day. And I bought it on a contract for deed because I could not get terms at that time. I could not get financing, and I overpaid, which was fine because otherwise I was going to pay for an apartment, and I figured Summit Avenue it's a prestigious street, was going to go up in value, and so I paid like $165. And inside it had, yes, 11-foot ceilings. However, there was paneling everywhere inside. But I didn't have money to fix it up because I was a single mom and I had to sell real estate for a living. That was my day job. Now you need to know that you don't have to be a realtor in order to do this story. You need a day job though. If you don't have anything to get started with, you got to have some income, right? So what I had to sell houses in order to make my money. And that's what I did. I went to work every day. I worked really hard. And I actually borrowed my manager's office here. I didn't have a big office at that time by myself. I'm coming clean with you now. And I bought that car used. And anyway, so forth. But like I said, I was a single mom. And I bought Summit. And I really couldn't fix it up right away. So what did I do? I worked really hard and I found a niche in the market. I was young and the other agents were older than me at the time, and I went after things they didn't want to touch, and that was condominiums. And they hated them because condominiums at the time were not selling, and there were a lot of foreclosures with them, and nobody wanted to deal with them because nothing was basically selling anyway. So I took on some condos. And I talked to this bank. I picked up an expired listing, and I talked to the bank rep, and I said, you know, you got to quit chopping the price down because these things, they need to get fixed up. And if a condo buyer wants it to be carpeted and painted, they don't want to go fix on anything because that's why they're buying a condo. So just let me fix them up was my idea. And I'd read this book called Housewise, which was like housewife. And so I was trying to do my little fix-up thing, right? So next thing, she trusted me on one, right? So I listed that darn little condo and I got it sold right away. So she gave me another one. And next thing I knew, within a year, I was the representative for those condos. I aced out another realtor who'd been around for a long time. He was known to do the condos in St. Paul, but I was awarded all the condos in St. Paul business. And so I got this listing. And so these are on Dale Street in St. Paul. There are 3 buildings in a row. And the one to the right is the buildings that I owned. And they were actually row houses like my one on Summit, which means they look like duplexes, but they aren't. Duplex, you own 2 units, right? And that's what I normally mean when I say duplex, where depending on where you're from, we all talk about it differently, right? But these on the end, they have a common wall. So I owned 1/2 and 1/2. And I didn't own it to begin with. The bank says, Terry, I want you to list this thing. And I did, and nobody was buying it. It was listed for $12,900, and I had it listed for 250 days. And the bank guy was young, and he says, I want you to stand there. You know, this was Minnesota winter, and there was no heat on one side, and the other side was condemned. It had heat. Of course, that makes a lot of sense in St. Paul, but that's how it goes there, and with the city. And so anyway, long story short, he says, I want you to stand there all weekend and hold this sealed bid auction. This is back in the 90s. Nobody ever heard of this. So I'm advertising in the paper, trying to get this all done. And so I stood there, freezing, sitting on the staircase the whole weekend. And I thought, well, it's a sealed bid auction. I wonder if they'll take my auction. But while I was doing that, I realized my grandfather had just passed away and left me $5,000. So I thought, the longer I thought about it, I thought, well, I could use that $5,000, and then I wonder if I can get $5,000 off my credit card. And so I did. I sealed my bid up, and I wrote $5,011. And there was another bid for $7,500 each, but the bank wouldn't take his because he had backed out on a 12.9 offer before. So they were mad at him. So they were mine. They sold them to me. My commission was $1,000, so I got them for $4,011 each. In the meantime, the agents, the old timers in my office said, they had their noses in the air, and I remember who said these things to me, and they said, well, I don't know what the hell you're doing that for, Terry. You know, what are you buying rental property for? You know, nobody wants rental properties in this market, and their tenants are just a pain in the ass. And they just went, wah at me. And I'm like, okay. So I just had to figure out how to fix them up next and how I was going to do this. So what did I do? I held 4 open houses a weekend trying to meet clients so I could sell them houses so that I could have money to pay my guys. And I was a flurry of activity. And then I had my kids half the time. And yeah, they saw a few houses along the way too. But long story short, I did get them fixed up. And then my problem was, how do I rent them? And my previous marriage, I had rented one property before, and it was a disaster. We had rented to some woman, and she had used us and told us her son was going to be a basketball player, and then she never paid us. And anyway, it was bad. So I was a little leery, but I did figure it out. And the Section 8 gals started calling me, and I'm like, what's that? And I had to figure that out. And next thing I knew, I had them rented for $650 a side. My problem is I owned them free and clear, right? Because I couldn't get financing. So I kept working at it. And because of the time of the cycle, and I'm going to show you that in a few minutes, it was hard to get financing. So what happened, I kind of remember this now, the bank said you had to owe the money in order to be able to borrow the money. You couldn't like get cash out. So I talked to my mom. I'm like, can't I owe you some money? Oh yeah, you can owe me some money. So I ended up owing my mom some money in some way or another. And it was like a year and a half later, I was able to refinance them, and I got a loan for each side. They appraised for 40 grand a piece then, and they gave me a loan for each side, and we paid my mom off. I don't know if I really had the money or not, but I did pay my mom off. And so then I had my cash back. And so at that point is when I went on and I thought, wow, now even with this loan, I figured it up. It covered my car payment, right? And I thought, I wonder if I could do this again and cover my house payment, which was $1,500. So I used some of that cash. And then about that time is when I got started over on Summit Avenue, back to the house that I had been renovating here. And so this is what the inside of my house looked like. So when I took down that paneling, I didn't take it down. I hired guys to do it. And because I was too busy working, right? So these are the lath walls underneath. The drop ceilings came down. I found extension cords in the wall, 30 amp service for 4,000 square feet. It did have some great architectural features though. It had this spiral staircase that went on up, and it really was covered by a flat roof. So I put a light in there so it looked like I had sunlight. And then I simply renovated to what I could afford, which was basically getting rid of the ugly and leaving the big expensive things for later. Because essentially what happened is if I built the garage that it didn't have, it was only 18 feet wide, but if I built that garage, that was too much money and I couldn't go buy other properties, right? And if I put the new kitchen in and I totally gutted those bathrooms, I didn't have that kind of cash. And I had figured out that there was money to be made over on these rental properties. So basically I kept this. It wasn't a simple rehab. I played on its wow factors. The spiral staircase, the beautiful trim that was here was already painted, so I really couldn't do anything about stripping it. I sanded its floors. That was a great accent. And then I opened up the space so that the next person could really see the potential, right? So I left money on the table when I eventually sold it. I believe my slide coming up will say 1996. And I made a little money on it. And this is called the principal residence game that I call. In those days, you had to always buy bigger. But in this case, nowadays you don't have to buy bigger, but I always believe in playing the principal residence game along with the investment game. And my clients that are online will attest to that right now. So here's kind of what the timeline looked like. Back in 91, because I want you to get a feel. So many people, they want to get started investing in real estate, and they don't realize you got to pay your dues. You don't have to make it be as long as it took me to do this, because Heck, there's models. I'm teaching you. There's people to follow to do this, right? So you don't have to recreate the wheel. Back then, there weren't. I think I was doing this about 7 years later, and one of my clients was a pharmacist, and Joe says, Terry, he says, what kind of books were written on this thing that you're doing? And I said, well, I don't know. I've been so busy doing it. I don't know of any books. I'd read that one book back before I got in real estate called Housewise. And so I bought all the books in the store at that time. And I'm like, oh, I read that Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, and that's what I was doing. And so I'm like, that's what I'm doing. And actually one of my clients recently, I don't know, I think this is not true, but he says, I researched, he says, when Rich Dad wrote that book, you own more properties than he did. I said, well, he is way smarter than me. He's way richer than me now. So I was a single mom, 91. I purchased Summit Avenue, principal residence. I had to have a place to stay, right? So then 11/20 of 92, I want you to get these time frames. I had $5,000 and I bought something in 92. Then I had to figure out, it took me pretty much all year to figure out how to rehab this thing, get it rented out, right? And then I didn't give up on ways to get my seed corn back, right? I finally figured out a way to do it, to leverage it, get that seed corn back, and I bought my second property. Then, I started thinking about that more, and I started to create my own model where I would buy, fix, rent, might refinance to get my seed corn again, repeat it again and again. And I started identifying anomalies. The first rehab loans were born in what we were doing. We're going to show you that in a few minutes. And I was cashing in on what I call market anomalies. And so later on, we're going to talk about this cash out refinance. So in about 2001, we cashed in on an anomaly with what's called the cash out refinance. So remember I said I had to owe money before then? Well, up until from when I was trying that from 1992 to 2001, every time I would go to my loan officer, I would say, Doreen, can you do cash out refinances on rental properties yet? And she says, no. And one day she calls me up. She says, Terry, I have cash out refinances on rental properties. I said, yes. I said, how many can you do? And she said, well, they didn't tell me. I said, Doreen, we're doing all of them. We're doing all of them right now because they're going to limit it. So in 3 months, I refinanced 34 properties. This is 2001, right? And I took out $750,000 cash, right? And so you figure my payments went way up, right? No. Overall, my payments went up $150. You're like, how can that be? Well, it was 10.5% and the interest rate went to 8.5%. So that compensated. In addition, my properties, I was getting higher rents in the day, but what did I do with that money? I bought like 15 more duplexes. So I probably created another 5,000 cash flow per month, right? And we did play with the money.
No.
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, we had some fun.
Yes, he wanted we were doing modified race car dirt track. I think I got a slide in here about that. And so we did some fun things with it as well.
Got some really fast motors. Didn't help me much on the track. But
I got diamonds out of it. But I still have my diamonds. You don't have any motors. But we did play with it. We actually were able to do some philanthropic things I'm going to show you in a few minutes about. So this process, so you notice I'm still not worth, well, I'm going to show you when I was worth $1 million. It takes a while. It went on. That first property that I spent $5,000 on, I didn't do anything. I kept it as a rental until the year 2001. And the reason that I renovated it then was because the neighborhood was complaining about my tenants. And up until that time, my tenants had been part of the neighborhood. They had been like the rest of the neighborhood, right? And so a lot of the neighborhood was rental at that time. And so what happened is the neighborhood transformed, and that's also called a market anomaly. So I had bought that Dale Street property, and the people even today on the line would say that's still kind of a transitional area, but it had transitioned from being full on rental to more owners than renters right in that spot. And so therefore the owners were complaining about the tenants. Now, did they have a right to? They can complain if they want. Did I have to move my tenant? No, but it gave me the opportunity to make a change, because instead of the neighborhood just slowly appreciating up until that point, there was an anomaly where it jumped because it went from rental to owner occupant mostly, right? And so it jumped extra. The other houses in other parts of the neighborhood did not jump at that time. And so I took advantage of that at that time. And Jason did the renovations. We were together at that time, and we did 1031 exchanges, bought a lot more properties, and actually, we're able to get closer to our 100-unit goal. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm going to share some more of that with you. So back here is what we did. So ultimately, I bought them for $5,000 a piece, and the right side sold for $215. And the left side for $235, because I waited for the neighborhood to transform. Now, when we renovated, we could have, it had paneling, it had thin woodwork, it didn't have architectural detailing that normally, this is an 1889, I think it was 1889 property, right? So what did Jason do?
Yeah, we stripped it out, put in all new mechanicals, new windows, and then put back in the original charm, the original woodwork. No more carpeting and paneling. It was sanded hardwood floors, and we even ended up doing granite countertops and stainless steel,
which was in 2001 pretty early.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of common day, but it was really early. And so we were giving people wow factors that they normally did not get. That's really important. Write that down. Give people a wow factor that they don't normally get, right? And so Jason received a historical preservation award from the City of St. Paul Architects for that renovation on Dale Street. So we're really proud of that. Now, my story would not be complete unless I make a big deal about goal planning to you guys. Now, remember, I was a therapist before, and everything is very, very important. And so goal planning, those who have a sense of purpose, those people who set goals as opposed to those people who don't set goals are a lot more likely to achieve them. You're twice as likely to achieve any goal if you identify it, right? And if you write it down and share it with somebody, you're 10 times more likely to achieve your goals. So I wish that I had been more, I wasn't always in tune with what I'm teaching you right now, right? I didn't have it all put together. I didn't have anybody I was modeling. I didn't have anybody that was teaching me. I didn't know anybody doing it to begin with, right? And at times I would remember to goal plan, and at times I would forget. And so I got there in 12 years, but you could do it a heck of a lot quicker if you were strategic about it. But at one point, after I owned a couple units, I went to lunch with my calculator. And of course, it's the same darn calculator today. And it does have some dog teeth marks on it. And it's an HP 12C. And I would go and I'd start goal planning. And that was all pre-Jason, because I don't do that as much by myself anymore. And so I started daydreaming about, I was trying to dream big, because when I was early in my career, I had went to a seminar with David Knox. And David Knox is a great real estate coach. And he had said, long time ago, 30 years ago, he said, I want you to dream, I want you to goal plan what it is you want to earn. So right now, if you have a pen on your hand, I want you to write down an income goal for yourself per month, right? And so I did that. And then he said to me, and so if I want you to have a number in your head, at least right this second, before I go on, now I want you to double that number. And I'm like, okay. He says, cross it off. So I did that. I wrote it down and I crossed it off. And then I wrote down the next number. And he says, I want you to cross it off again. And said, I did it again. And then my skin would start to crawl. And I tell people this story. And if you've been on my calls, my goal planning, you've heard this before. But I remember it was life-changing to me. It really sunk in. And so for me, it was 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. So he says, I want you to visualize that goal and think about it every day, because you will get there. And I'm like, oh, you're crazy. But the thing is, we did get that way. I did get there. And when I didn't earn that kind of money, it was bad, right? Sometimes when you get to something that was big and crazy for you, your big, hairy, scary dream, you forget to make it bigger again. So I challenge you, and that's where I dropped the ball at times on this, because I forgot to dream bigger. Because what I did that next time is I was remembering David Knox 10 years later when I went to lunch by myself, and I created this dream sheet. And in those days, I recreated this recently so you could see it. I my cash flow per month, you always got to know your numbers, is $332 per unit is what I was receiving on average on my units. And so I had maybe 5 or 10 at that time. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to dream bigger, like David said, right? So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to sketch this out. What are my total return? What's a total return on investment? Now, this will play into my secret number for Jeff Worth of the Worth Companies later to become a billionaire. That is all of these columns that I'm talking about. So one is your cash flow per year or per month, how much after you pay your debt, and how much, if you're paying utilities, how much is left over for you after you pay them all, right? How much, if that property appreciates, are you going to make on the property by it going up in value, why that tenant is paying on it for you. And the debt reduction is the mortgage that it's getting relieved by the tenant paying their rent. And then the depreciation is the beautiful number that makes you feel good on your tax return each year, especially if you buy taxes, because what happens is the IRS gives you the gift. This is when they give you a gift, believe me. And they say, okay, you are renting your property, so therefore it's only worth 27.5 years. It's going to be not worth anything. So we're going to let you depreciate it. And that's not true, but they let you depreciate it over that time period, and you get to take that. And that offsets this 2,400 on one unit offsets my 3,000. So I did any other work to the property, I probably, even though I made some money, I probably show loss on my tax return. So I took it from a 1 unit, 10 units. I was dreaming big that day, and I thought 20 units. And I thought, no, you're supposed to dream bigger. So I took it to 30. I'm like, no, I've got to do 40, 50. I'm like, God, I'm just fine. I'm just going to do 100 units. So I created this graph, and I said, oh, 100 units, that'll get me 25,000 per month cash flow. And my total annual change in my net worth is 1.6 million. And I started looking at that number, and I typed it up, and I couldn't do it on a computer. We didn't have them back then. And Jason says that when he met me a couple years later, I carried this thing around with me everywhere I went. Now, I did lose it at some point. And the really important part about this story is I got to 100 units. I did not go to 99. I did not get to 101. And I did forget to dream bigger at that point. I was doing other things. He was racing cars. We were helping people philanthropically, but I forgot to keep changing my goals. So don't let that be you. But it's a great goal. Now you want to have your own goals. You might say, I want 2,500 passive income per month by a certain date. The more specific you are about your goals, maybe you got to start with your credit. That's okay. People do that. You can get around your credit as well. So don't let that, or maybe you just are going to start with your principal residence. It depends. Everybody's strategy is very different, right? So you could say, I'm going to buy a duplex by June 1st, or I'm going to get a return on my investment of this much. But all this is really important until I actually received, I was horse trading a few properties around. Let's see if I can find the picture. The second property is here. I purchased the second property for $10,000 in June of 94. Remember, my first property is 11 of 92. So I'm really slow telling you this story at this point because I want you to get that first million takes the longest, right? I bought it in 94. It was in the Midway, 1166 Thomas for St. Paulites. And so it was all boarded up, and everybody was afraid to go in because there was no electricity. So I went in there with my flashlight, and I thought, I touched those windows, and I'm like, there's glass under there. They just boarded up thinking it was a bad neighborhood. And I didn't think it was a bad neighborhood because the first house I'd ever bought had been in the neighborhood. So I thought, I know I can rent this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath place. So I went on, I got my people to renovate it, bought it for 10 grand out of that money I got from Dale Street, right? And I also started renovating Summit. And so kind of continued along this course. I probably had 15 units when one phone call changed my life forever. And that phone call, really, none of you would probably even know who I am right now if I hadn't gotten that phone call. So that phone call was really important. So all you realtors on the line, just answer your phone. It's my biggest beef with realtors these days is very few people answer their phone live. And had I not done that, all kinds of things wouldn't have happened. And sometimes I call realtors, I'll call 30 realtors and only 3 of them call me back when I'm giving them an opportunity to come to their city. It's crazy. So it's one of my pet peeves. So But this phone call was, I had this triplex for sale for another owner, and I didn't buy it from him, but I had it for sale, and I had it advertised in the Harmon Homes magazine. And it was listed for $73,900, and another gentleman was on the end of the line, and his name was Mark Iverson. He and his partner John had been listening to Carlton Sheets, and they were all jazzed up on following what Carlton Sheets had told them to do, much akin to all the real estate gurus and the Shark Tank people and the HGTV people that come to town selling you their big programs. But this triplex had 3 bedrooms on one side, 3 bedrooms on the other, and a little apartment on top. And they wanted to buy investment real estate. And up until that point, I was well into this. And I'm like, well, I guess I could teach my clients how to do this. And so they were interested. So I started teaching them what I was doing. And so we created a relationship, and they actually bought this property, and they bought it with a credit card. Basically, they got a credit line off their credit card and came up with the money as well. And a long story short, they actually were my long-term clients. They are the reason we are in Southwest Florida. They were the 2 people we knew when we moved to Southwest Florida 5 years ago. And we've done lots and lots of deals together. We probably talk daily about the real estate market. So once you find your group, you want to stay connected, because then you can relate and stay on top. So a lot of my clients, we will have a long-term relationship. I'm sure we will be family by the time we're done with all this. But more importantly, that phone call led me to Jason. And I'm going to let Jason tell you his story.
Yeah, hi. I had known Mark and John a little bit, but I did not live in the Twin Cities at the time. I had moved there to be closer to my daughter, to spend time with her. And Mark was driving truck at the time, said, I can help you get a job. I left behind a job at a cabinet shop that I really enjoyed doing, building cabinets and furniture. I came to the St. Paul area and took a job driving truck, and I moved into that 3rd floor unit. Now, I did start helping them renovate some of their properties, because they were just kind of getting started at that time. And by hanging around with Mark and John and working on their properties, I saw how much fun they were having. For one thing, it was a good positive energy, which makes a lot of difference. I mean, it makes you want to be involved in that. Not only that, I started realizing by when they would tell me how much they were, renting these things out for, and how they could get the prices they could get them, that I really needed to get on the other side where I could make some better money. At first, I just wanted to have a house to live in for my daughter and I, instead of this little apartment up there. And I went to it before I met Terry.
That's right. He did live in the 3rd floor here.
I did. And it was after I moved out that they found that body in the trunk of the car in the summertime.
Yes.
It started.
It wasn't, Mark and John didn't even own it then.
But I did. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was in the backyard one day when the cops came running through with their guns drawn, chasing somebody. And I just sat back on my truck and let them run by. Anyway, it was that kind of neighborhood. But it was okay. I was working all the time anyway. So I asked a different realtor, because I had not met Terry, to help me find a house. Just pick somebody out of a magazine. And this is totally the wrong way to do it, but I knew nothing about it. And this person showed me a house and then talked to me and said, here, let me have you talk to my loan officer. And they are not all created equal. I know Terry said that, but this is my story. Is I was told, you're going to have to wait. You're doing the right things. You're building your credit back up, but you can't get a house yet. You're going to have to wait 6 months or a year, and then call me back. Well, I ended up mentioning that one day when I was working on some properties, and Mark said, just go talk to Terry. She figures out ways to get things done. See if she can help you. So I did. And she sat me down and wanted to know what my goals were. Said, I don't know. I guess I'd love to be self-employed doing what you guys are doing, but I don't know if I can do it. I was told I can't even get a loan. And she said, look, we can probably do that. Just go see Doreen Drake is actually who she took me to. And Doreen sat me down in one session, asked me a few questions, looked at stuff, and said, there's no reason I can't get you qualified today. You just have to write a letter of explanation and a little bit higher interest rate.
Yeah.
She had other loan
2%
programs.
more.
Yeah, 2%, yeah.
Yeah, it was 12.9.
It allowed me to get
10.9.
started right now.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted. I would have paid a lot more than that interest rate,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
he was paying 26% on a
used
car.
On a used truck.
I found his papers later.
Yes. I was rebuilding credit.
Together,
I was working hard at rebuilding credit, and I had no credit.
You got to do what you got to do,
That's
right?
Right. Had to get to work. So anyway, they got me pre-approved right away. And I already had been looking at what they were doing, you know, and next thing was I had to find a little bit of money. So Terry again was, well, do you know anybody who trusts you, who has a little bit of money, they might help you invest? So long story short, I did end up getting a small, well, $30,000 loan from my mother, who was around at the time.
Her line of credit.
Her line of credit.
Mm-hmm.
And I made payments to her faithfully ahead of time and all that, kept that relationship great there. But with that $30,000 and some new credit that Terry had found that I could get, we went shopping, and it was fun. We looked at a lot of properties, and there's some examples here of what I did end up buying. I think one of the first ones I bought cash flowed $1,000 a month, and I paid what, $69,000 for that one.
65. Let me see if I can find that particular
I'd take
one.
those deals all day, every day, if I could still find them. And you know, there's deals in every market, but back then very few people were looking at these things. They were on the east side or places where people had preconceived notions, and Terry had been gone past that preconceived notion stage and decided to look at these properties and analyze cash flows.
I found that the people weren't as scary as we thought they were. They were great
good.
people, and if you treated them well, they treated you well. I mean, we used to go and deliver turkeys to them on Christmas.
I can't say we never had a tenant that trashed the place, but we had 100 rental units. It's going to happen, but the majority of them were very good people.
Right.
They really were.
Right.
They were just didn't have a lot of money, and they all need a good place to live. So anyway, I ended up buying 6 rental units. One of them was a single family home for myself and my daughter to live in. And we did that within 6 months. And because I really was motivated to quit my job and start working for myself. And with that, Terry said, you know, that's great, but you shouldn't quit your job yet. You should keep your job. If you can keep going, you can build a lot bigger portfolio if you keep your job.
Borrowing power.
Right.
I'm quitting my job now.
I said, great, but 6 units is enough for me. That's all I want. So I quit my job. Terry and I did end up getting together, getting married, and instead of 6 units, we had 100 units eventually. Yeah. But it was great getting to that point.
He bought,
was very interesting.
That one duplex was $1,000 cash flow per month. This property on the right here had a fire, and it wasn't that bad. And
it was a very small fire, and it had the water was the heat was off in the winter, so we didn't know if the radiators were going to be cracked or not. Turns out they weren't.
He was going to flip that one. Then we figured out how to keep it, because long term he'd make more money if it was going to be a flip, and that was the one.
Like 26,000.
Yes, 26,000. That's the one. That's the only property I ever did work on personally with my own hands, because we were dating, and he says.
When I closed on it, I was very excited. I got a dumpster lined up and ready, and in that neighborhood, you don't leave a dumpster sitting in the alley. The neighbors will fill it for you.
Yes, this is true.
So Terry says, "Well,
Valentine's Day.
What are you doing this weekend?" I didn't realize it was.
Of course, he doesn't plan.
So I got a dumpster. I'm going to fill it. So Terry.
So I filled a dumpster on Valentine's Day, and so he'll never live that down. So he was going to flip it, but I did figure out a way to get his seed corn back, because that was a lot of cash out of that 30 grand, right? And so then he was able to keep it, and then we kept it till a point where we decided we could move the money. It gotten where it was worth only like 65,000, and we were selling it one day. And this is where you want to cut your losses. This is a good lesson too. We were selling it, and we got to the closing table, and the closer said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it won't close today because the buyers have a judgment, and it was from welfare fraud." Mm-hmm. They had said maybe that the guy didn't live there. I don't know, whatever. She had $3 grand worth of welfare fraud on her credit that came up at the last second, and she couldn't buy it. But what happened was the night before, this neighborhood, there was a walk-by shooting. And you might think, what's a walk-by? Well, those are because they're so poor that they can't afford cars, that they have to walk by and shoot each other. So we had heard that there'd been a walk-by shooting the night before in the neighborhood, and I'm like, oh my God. So I called the closer up, and I said, I'll pay that judgment. Yep. And we paid that judgment off and closed the next day. So sometimes you cut your losses. Money, I didn't want it to be empty. It was looking pretty. It had nice woodwork. I didn't want to have to redo it again.
Right.
So this little house down here is on Mounds Bluff. It's 32 Mounds Boulevard, and it had no hope for parking. So I talked about wow factors, right? So sometimes you want to add something that will detract. So in this case, I couldn't get the parking in there, and since it faced the bluff of St. Paul, I had a guy for $2,600 create this carved sculpture here with the Indian skull to
Full
match
size,
the neighborhood,
life
full
size.
size. And
we put that wraparound deck on front so you could sit out on your porch and overlook the city.
so when it sold, and we bought it back once because we loved the property and we sold it again, although somebody in the neighborhood did lasso that Indian and took him for a ride behind his pickup truck. This was the east side of St. Paul. And we did rescue him and had him rebuilt again. Anyway, it's a great house. And so that's another one. So the fateful day of when did I get to be worth $1 million? And it took until March 6th of 1999. And that was on our anniversary. Because remember, that started in 1992 for me. And then, so 7 years to get to that first million. This is our wedding. We paid for everyone. Jason sold his house to pay for his part of the wedding. His mother, who is here, she's since passed away. She's somewhere right beside us. Where is she? And she has since passed. And Doreen Drake is our handy loan officer here, all our friends and family. Mark and John Mark's beside me and John's beside him, and all our family and friends. And so we were able to pay for that retreat for a weekend for everyone out of our proceeds. And I had made my $5,000 worth $850 that day, and his $30,000 was worth $150,000. And so the day we got together, he had to help me get to the first million.
Yep, you needed me.
So, but the second million does not take as long. It simply took 1 year. And what happened is we owned 20 duplexes. And 20 duplexes all went up $50,000 each. And so therefore we were worth $2 million. Didn't have to work as hard for that, right? So that first million takes the longest. We went on and we converted an office space or a house to a commercial space. We did triplexes. We converted 6-unit to townhomes.
Split off an extra lot and sold it as a buildable lot, and then renovated the house from the original part.
And as our ability to, our wealth grew, we were able to take on other endeavors. We actually were able to help a lot of family and friends, and that's actually why we like to have some money. And anytime we have money, the first thing we do is spend it on other things that are important to us. We were able to help family members with monthly allowances until they passed away. He did do his modified race car. I had a nice tax deduction, as you can see here, and we expanded our portfolio to other states. So one of our agents that work for us had a dream to own a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and I just couldn't figure out a way to help her purchase that house. And so instead we stepped up and bought the house for her. And we made a deal that we would split the profits. I think we said, I don't know if we gave her what percentage. It was like at least 25% of the profit. We paid for everything. And this house is still, it's called Still Ben now. Back then it's the Bernard Schwartz house. It was featured when we did it on the Fine Living channel on TV.
When it was built, it was featured on.
No.
Was it on the magazine?
Yeah,
Life
Life magazine. It was
cover
featured.
of Life magazine.
Yeah. So it's in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. If you want to look it up and stay there, it's a great house. So we were able to do that. Later on, we sold it and paid our friend her percentage of the profit, and then they were able to continue managing it from there on out. But market timing, I alluded to that before. In market timing, there's phases to every market, and you should know about that. And so this is how I like to refer to it. I want you to know that it's cyclical. So my investing started back in 1991 on this project, right? So when I got to that first million, it was near the end of this green. So it was during this absorption time period. You do not go from absorption to decline. You do not, so it's cyclical. You're going to go to expansion, go to decline. How long it takes to get through every cycle depends. This cycle I have noted here is the Minneapolis cycle. The Montana cycle, they hit the top of the market a year or two after everybody. They were kind of near 08, right? The same thing in Southwest Florida. They were 07-ish, and the public kind of learned about the top of the market reaching it in late 07, right? You can go through this cycle. It can be different in different marketplaces. And I started searching for us different places to invest as early as 2001. Notice the top of the market was way before that. I was already getting uncomfortable because I saw rents had stabilized, and And we still could rent things at that point, but the problem was the prices were going up, and I wasn't going to get, if I continued to buy, I was not going to get the cash flow that I was accustomed to. So I paid a group called Real Source, and they taught me this concept, and I wish everybody would teach everybody this concept. It's the first thing I cover with my clients, and I want you to get this because you want to know where you're at in every market cycle. We refer to it as 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. And so you want to know where you're at, because financing in the beginning of the absorption cycle is very hard, right? Nobody wanted to give loans out. Later on, remember up here in the expansion, it was really easy to get a loan, right? And what happens in a decline? So if you were to cut this thing in half, this side is a buyer's market and this side is a seller's market. So the way you negotiate, the way you find deals, how financing's all put together really has to depend on this cycle. What I want you to know is the answer you get for financing or money or all of that changes over time based on what's going on in your market. You have to understand that the bank that's talking to you is always looking back. They're looking back 2 or 3 years at their experience. So at the beginning of this green cycle, they're going to look back, they're going to see red. Nah, we're not doing loans, right? So when they get through this green, they look back, things are getting healthier, so therefore they start to give loans, right? So when you breach, it was really funny because at the top of the market, I'm like, why are they giving out loans? Because I knew what was coming, because I'm anticipating buyer motivations and what the statistics are going on in the market. But a bank, well, they were still giving out loans for like a year and a half past when they should have been, because they were looking back again, right? So it's really important to understand what phase of the market you're in, and different things will work at different times. For example, good cash, credit, and a job are required. When are they required or not? Okay, so we're going to look at this. This is a new game I created for this seminar. So if you have cash, credit, and a job, those are normally the 3 things you need to get a loan. So you need them in the absorption time period. You need them in the decline, right? And last time in our expansion market, you did not need them. Low down payments are easy to obtain, kind of at the end of this arrow in the green and into the yellow, right? Hard to finance, lenders are pushing for large down payments. That would be when we get into the red, right? And into the beginning of the green. Only perfect credit and stable jobs to get loans in the red, right? They're not going to do it. They don't know where the bottom is. Investor loans are easy or hard, right? So in the expansion, they would be easier. They're going to be really hard coming into the beginning of the green or in the full end of the red. Cash out refinances on principal residence. You will get them as we start, like at the 2015 onward, and cash out refinances on investment property, kind of after 9 o'clock onward, they'll probably start to appear. Low down payments on investment property. Last time it got too crazy, and it shouldn't get that way again. What happened last time, and if you work with me, I'll teach you even more in detail about this. I can't go I'm really getting detailed here, but it just depends. And so what happened last time should not be a repeat. Hopefully our government does not intervene, and what they did and artificially held us up caused us to be in the decline for another 4 or 5, 6 years than we needed to be in, right? So with that, the cycle has everything. So a lot of what happened to me is I was building wealth in this cycle. When things changed, I was looking for other avenues. We went to other markets. We ended up in Biloxi, Wisconsin, Montana, Florida, all of that. But there was something that artificially pushed us up and super surged in the expansion market, which caused it to come down, which really hurt, right? And so, so hopefully that doesn't happen. We want market cycles. We want it to be normal. We don't want things to go up 45% in 1 year, because then we're going to crash, right? So we want a normal market, which is kind of where a lot of markets are right now. So the question is, what time is it in your marketplace now? And that's something that you want to, and every market's different. We did a motorcycle trip in July. We did rent flipper run in Denver, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Carolinas, Nashville, and we realized that different places were at different time periods, right? So So you also need to know how to use 1031 exchanges. Certainly, if I bought a house for $5,000 and I sold it for $235,000, I was going to pay a lot of tax, right? So I didn't hardly pay taxes anytime while I was buying and selling a lot of property. So you have to be really smart and know what you're doing. The other thing is you need to know how to address all these things: finding tenants, managing your property, whether you should keep your job or not, calculating returns, and all of that. But
how to get into properties with the lowest amount of money. That was one of the first things you showed me. I wouldn't have had a clue, but
yeah,
you know, save the money.
So
do more.
Now what I did now is I'm going to give you some really important concepts that summarize what I showed you, because I showed you a heck of a lot of stuff, probably more than you've heard in an hour in your life, I would guess, because I've given you a lot of really important things. I want you to get that first million takes 10 times longer than the second, right? So you have to be patient. You have to take your little baby steps. Sometimes it's just you have to start by learning. Sometimes you have to find somebody to model after, right? You got to surround yourself with the right people. Now, I bought for cash flow, and appreciation just happened. Now, real estate does have 4 different ways that investors make money. They can take appreciation, cash flow. There can be other ways to make money on it, or you could have ancillary investment income. So you want to think about that when you're investing in real estate. Don't eat your seed corn. And if you're going to use it, you better figure out a way to get it back. Otherwise, unless your goal is just this, right? And you've got it and that's all you want. Everybody's goal does not have to be big like this. I don't even necessarily recommend it. I recommend being diverse, right? You can create whatever it is you want, but don't waste your money. And this is important, grand slam deals. I hear it all the time. People are like, well, I'm just waiting for that really great deal. The best deals we've ever made, we never knew they were great when we started. Remember that first one I talked about when all the agents were saying poo-poo, right? That was a great deal. But nobody else recognized that. When Doreen called me and said, I've got cash out refinances, and I said, refinance them all, and I took that money, and that really pushed my business forward. That was an anomaly. I took advantage of it. I can tell you that probably not one agent in my office recognized it as an anomaly, and nor did they call their clients to go do it. Right? And they could have sold more houses, but they didn't even know it was a problem because it wasn't something they were working with, something that was on their radar, right? Unless you have a goal, you won't even know there's an anomaly there to take advantage of. And it's kind of like you need to play the rich dad, poor dad cash flow game, because you got to take some educated risk, and then something wow comes your way. So people might sit here and say on this seminar and say, oh, she had all the good breaks. No, I just happened to be in the game, and I was aware when the opportunity came about. I was aware enough, and I had a bigger goal. My bigger goal pushed me to take advantage of the anomaly that appeared. So if you can start investing in your backyard, if possible, if you can make the numbers work, it's great, because then you can touch and feel it. You know what's going on, and you'll do better. Sometimes we do have to go to other markets. Jason and I are going to be doing the Should You Rent It, Flip It, or Run roadshow, and looking for investor deals throughout the country and analyzing other markets while we coach clients. So it's going to be really fun this year.
Yeah,
so
like
stay tuned with us.
We did that in July, and it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Build around your success. You know, if you're successful at one thing, stick with it. You can learn about other things, but keep with it and build around your success. Identify your market anomalies. It's so important to reach outside yourself. And there's a lot more detail about this, and there are all kinds of things. For example, Denver's got their anomalies right now are oil and marijuana. It's legal there. So what is that going to do to the real estate market? What's that going to do? What kind of businesses? Who's that going to affect? Where can you like plug in and make some money on that? Right? So there's all kinds of anomalies to take. They can be small and they can be big. So, and if you read it online, you're probably too late. So you don't want to rely on what you're reading or hearing, or if realtors starting to talk about something, they're generally way too late because they aren't always in tune, right? You want to move from entrepreneurial to purposeful. Just give it up. Follow a model. You will go much more quickly directly to getting what you want. If we are entrepreneurial and we don't really know what we're doing, and we have a feeling we want to do it this way, and I've done it that way already, you guys. Yes, sounded like it didn't take me real long, but it was a long time. I did it. I made some mistakes along the way. And so if I'd known what I'm telling you now, I could have done it a heck of a lot more easily, right? Who knows what I could have done if I didn't even know I had a big goal until 7 years later. Follow the model before you add creativity. Lead with your revenue. Don't spend all your money. Understand your neighborhoods. This is key. Just go and know all of them. Don't just do the ones you're comfortable with. I can't tell you how many times we said, we will never go to that neighborhood. And next thing we knew, we owned 20 things in that neighborhood because it made sense. We recently drove around here and there was a neighborhood that people looked poorly on, and there was a lot of crime. I remember the first broker here that I met, she says, oh, the police follow me every time I get in that neighborhood. And I went through there recently. I'm like, this smells like money.
Mm-hmm. We were in that neighborhood today.
Yes.
And found a great deal.
Yes, we did. We did. We're going to go through that later with 13. Be willing to do today. Today I'm going to do what others won't. So tomorrow I can do what others can't, right? That's one of Jason's favorites. Yeah. I was supposed to let you do that one.
No, that's good. You keep going.
Take educated risk, not blind risk. And identify multiple strategies with each property. A lot of times, people are like, I just want to flip. I just want to flip. I'm like, it's way better if we can figure out how to do multiple strategies at the same time, because it's safer too. If something changes, you can change with it, right? And know your exit strategies and be willing to change. Things change. And so, at times we thought we wanted to keep a property forever, but something might happen in that marketplace because I'm in tune and I reevaluate. So it's not a decision is not forever. That decision is good for today. Right? And then you stay in tune and you keep making good decisions as you go by surrounding yourself with others and getting their opinion and seeing if what you're seeing is the same thing they're seeing, right? Move quickly and decisively. You want to take action. You do not want to, notice the reaction, it's really hard, right? And that was really key when the downturn came, right? I had a conversation with one of my clients January 1st of 06. The country really didn't know about the decline until late 07. So my clients were able to take action, and we took action, and we got out of things, and we cut our losses and got down, because I knew it was going to be really bad because everything had been artificially held up for a long time. So our clients took action. And then the problem is, if you waited too long until it came out in the news, then it was a reaction, right? And then the bottom was falling out. And so then you price it and it should be okay, but the price is lower and it's lower and it's lower. And it's really, really devastating, right? So your vibe attracts your tribe. So this is really, really important. Now, Jason, John, Mark, and I had a lot of fun. We still do today, and our tribe is bigger now.
That was one of the first things I said when I was talking about my part of the story. Is it was just a very good, positive feeling being around you guys. You were having fun doing it, and it was working. And, sure, there were a lot of people out there saying it wasn't a smart thing to do, but you guys were doing it, and I wanted to be part of it. Yeah.
So develop your mindset. You can do, and get the right people on your bus and the wrong people off as fast as you can. I've made bad decisions with that. Leverage. Do what you like and don't do what you don't like, right? Reanalyze every property annually. Then the secret to becoming an Austin Power billionaire is 30% total return on your investment. So those are the total, not your cash on cash. The total return is what you should earn if you want to become a billionaire. Do the math. You got to be objective, not subjective. Don't buy something because you love it. That will probably stop you in your tracks. And if it doesn't feel good in your gut, run. Save. Make your places livable, but not excessive. A lot of new investors like to try all the bells and whistles and do the HGTV thing. And if you're renting them, don't do it yet, because you want to save the perfect rehab for selling, not for renting, right? And develop your professional team. You also, Peter Vidmar, the Olympic gymnast, said to me, I was in I was on a retreat one time, and he was a speaker, and those of you that are young don't know who that is, but he scored a perfect 10 at the Olympics. And they asked him, what's the difference between somebody, there's those guys who get like a 9.95 or 9.85. And what's the difference between a 10? And he says, well, it's simple, really. There's three things. One is you need to take risk. We all need to take risk. If you want to get ahead, you got to take a risk. You want to be educated risk. He doesn't want to go do that maneuver without practicing it, right? And then he's got to be original. You create an original within your model, right? But you got to look, you can't be exactly like everybody else. And the difference, so a lot of gymnasts have those things, but there's those who score the 9.985, and that's the guy who scores a 10. And the difference is the virtuosity. It's the enthusiasm with what you do, and the passion to learn, the passion to be around others, the passion to give, the passion to receive and learn. And so if you do that, you can do this thing called real estate, right? So, all right, we're going to open up for questions. My gift to you, my big gift to you is if you feel compelled to talk to me for some reason. Sometimes the right person appears for the right reason. Here is where you get right in my schedule, terryandjason.com /apply. Terry with a Y, I'm not a guy. And this call is for you if you have a dream or goal and you want to take some steps to achieve it. Maybe you're open to some feedback from others and you're coachable, right? And you're willing to take steps to invest in your future. Maybe you heard something that resonates with you and you want something more, but you don't really know how to get it. I'm willing to talk to you. It's a 45-minute call. I'd love to hear more about it. You just go to apply now, terryandjason.com /apply. And you can get in my schedule as soon as tomorrow, and whatever works for you. So make sure you do that. So if you have questions now, you can unmute yourself if you'd like, or you can drop them in the chat if there's something somebody would like to talk about. Sorry about my cough. Been talking too long. All right. Uh-oh, the audio is picking up. Shoot. I hope all of you could hear. Carla had a hard time. Anybody? Don't be shy. We still have 30 people on the line. And you just unmute, you just hit your little mic thing and you can talk to me. So I don't feel like I'm out here by myself. Yeah. So what we do and we work with people is we really work one-to-one a lot. We have like a hybrid program that we help with people, and we are who we are, and you get what it looks like we are today. So.
Hi, Terry.
Yes.
It looks like Barbara Rounds has a question.
Barbara.
She says, at first, is it best to buy in your backyard, as you mentioned, or out of state?
So Barbara, what I would do to start with is we would evaluate your marketplace. We want to know what time is your marketplace in as far as market timing goes, you know, so is it 12 o'clock? Is it 11 o'clock? Is it 6 o'clock? What time is it? What kind of opportunities are there? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? What kinds of price ranges are there too? And then what we do is we create a strategic plan for you. So based on your own personal goals and what it is that you're trying to achieve and your personal strengths, assets, those kinds of things, we kind of look at your marketplace to see, does it have what you need? One thing I might do is analyze different neighborhoods and see what kind of cash flow is there. You want to take the temperature of the market. You want to figure out, you know, is it hard to find a tenant or not? How long do things stay vacant? You know, before you decide, are you gonna flip or are you gonna hold? Or which is the best strategy for? So there's a lot of complicated things. I'm trying to give you like 30 years worth of experience here in an hour, and it's really hard. But so if you can find something that works for you and the numbers work in your market, that can be good. But it also might be good, you know, depending on your situation. We have investors that will be investing with us, and we will go and buy things for them out of state and set up property management as well. There could be, you know, I've got people in California, and maybe, you know, there's something called the affordability index. And sometimes when the average person can't buy the average house, then if depending on what your goals are and what sources of money you have, you might have to go invest somewhere else if you want to do something, right? Depending on your marketplace. So I can't, it's not a cookie cutter question. I like you to do it at home first because you'll learn more at home because you can touch and feel it, and you'll be more in tune. I'll know what's happening in my marketplace where I'm living faster than if something's changing in another marketplace, unless I'm really connected, which you want to be in another marketplace. Tips on finding good tenants. Have rules. One of the things that Jason and I did,
rules.
And you don't want to ever be accused of discrimination. If you are ever accused of discrimination, you will lose everything you've got. So it's best to create a rule sheet. And so what we did is we created a rule sheet, and we said
a rating
system, and rating system. We said, okay, number 1, no unlawful detainers. Number 2, no felonies, right? So all the things that, depending on the property, you know, or in some properties, if I had a property in an affluent neighborhood, I might not take a credit score below 620. If I have a property in a low income neighborhood, I might take a credit score less than 600 depending on what the score is. So I have, like right now, what we're doing, we own a property management company. One of my rules right now is no credit score. Credit scores 600 and above, I don't charge last month's rent. If you have a lower than 600, then I charge last month's rent as well. But one of the cool things that Jason and I created that nobody's probably ever heard of on the line right now, and we did this a lot in Minneapolis, St. Paul, is we create something called the home visit. And so we gave them a rating scale, 1 to 10 on a home visit, because what we realized is when you see a lot of properties, you'll know in 10 seconds if you like that, if you would rent to that tenant or not. It's not that they are clean freaks or anything like that, but you can tell the person who's got holes in the wall, the person who has big grease on their stove,
countertop, table,
and so what we would do is say part of our evaluation process is a home visit. There's 10 points here, and we need to come see you in your property. So now if we go in their property and it's one of the tenants that you would not, it's not that the property needs work, because that's the landlord, right? It's about the tenant. How do they pick up? Do they wipe their hands? Do they wipe their feet? Whatever, right? And so then we would give them a low score or high score based on what we saw. If they did not allow us to come, they got a 0, and therefore they couldn't be. There's probably a reason why they didn't want us to come, right? So we did some of those things.
Interestingly too, we also put points on there for honesty, because then right up front when we're talking to them, we can say, you know, if you tell me the truth, it doesn't mean for sure you're disqualified. If you have something on your record, tell me about it. Maybe it's fine. But if they lie to me and then they try to slide it by, it comes back and it's like, okay, there's a bunch of points gone because you're lying to me.
Oh, and this was, my property manager called me. She's new at her job right before we got on. And she says, well, Terry, she says she had an unlawful detainer. I said, no unlawful detainer. She's, and she says, well, what about the stories? I said, I know, I've heard all the stories. The longer the story, the
more practice.
Oh my God, the more practice. And you just stick to your rules and don't go with the story every time, because I've done that and I paid for it because I bent the rules, right? Yeah. So anyway, those are some of the cute, you want to pull their credit. Yeah. You want to check their landlord. You want to make sure they have 3 times the amount of income for rent, and they can cover it. If they don't have 3 times the rent, we don't rent to them as well. So cash flow per month, what's good and what's bad. So a total return on your investment, I'm talking about for that 30%. That included the appreciation, the depreciation, the paying off your mortgage. So for example, I don't know if Randy's on right now, but we were looking at a property earlier today, and it was a 10 unit, and they don't always have to be 10 units, but they were duplexes and whatever. We were doing the numbers. So on that building, he was going to get 11% cash on cash return. So he get 11% the first year back, but after the rents were too low, after he raised the rents a little, it'd be 17% cash on cash, which is not the total return. The total return is a bigger calculation, and it probably was in the 30 to 40% range. It's quite a bit bigger than that, right? So you have to decide what's good for you. There were times back when Jason, Mark, and I were doing this, and we would do the cash on cash return, and the lower the price, the higher the cash on cash return. because you don't have as much down payment. You don't have as much into it. So that's why sometimes the bigger buck stuff for cash flow, the lower the price, the higher the cash on cash return.
Oftentimes the rents are
You have to
almost
play
as
it.
much as the high end rents.
So you want to
too,
compare. So go to a neighborhood, compare another neighborhood, and then, yeah. So do I have my tenants go monthly? So sometimes I do month-to-month leases, and sometimes I do annual leases. Now, where we're at in Florida now, they don't like month-to-months because of all the sales tax and stuff. So they like to collect that if it's less than 6 months. So depending on your state, it's different. But other times when there was competition for rentals, right? And there were a lot of tenants applying. I, a lot of times, did month to month because sometimes. Minnesota is a state that is more tenant friendly than landlord friendly. So if I had a problem with a tenant, it was harder for me to get them out. And then Florida is the opposite. And so I would do month to month if it was easy to get tenants, because if I suspected they were doing drugs but I couldn't prove it, I just give them a 30-day notice. I didn't have to prove anything. I got them out. That was legal, right? And on an annual lease, you got to have reasons, right? If it's a soft market for tenants, it's harder to find tenants, then I might go with my annual leases and that kind of thing. No, we aren't using payments. I love Laura. Laura, aren't you on here now, my bookkeeper?
Still like the 12 pre-addressed stamped envelopes.
We did do that, yeah, but no, a lot of people are doing online things, and I have a bookkeeper, and she's trying to convert over, and that's her goal this month, to get them to pay online and all those kinds of things. And yes, we do credit checks and all that online. It takes about 1 minute to check everything out.
Things have changed, and there was a time where, and it still would be functional, it still worked, but when they moved in, we gave them a little folder with information, and in that was 12 envelopes addressed to us with a stamp on it.
I don't want any excuses. I couldn't find a stamp. Yeah.
There's the envelope, there's a stamp, there's the address. Just put it in the mail.
An unlawful detainer is when you have to take legal action to get somebody out of your property because they haven't paid. And so that can take you weeks or a month or two and cost you money. And so it's not a fun thing. It's not fun. So any other questions? What else? See if I missed anything else.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I have a quick question. I'm not familiar with the cash out refinance. Is that a program that's still available? And if so, can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so as you get through, as we're at the top of absorption in a lot of marketplaces right now, lenders on investment property, what they might do is refinance it and let you take cash out. And when we're in the early part of that cycle, they won't let you do that. They won't let you take any extra cash out. So right now we are at a point where if you were to check, you might check with a lender and they say, no, we don't do that. Right now we're at a point where I'm hearing it more and more. I think it's getting prevalent that you can refinance. As long as you have, if you buy a property, you fix it up and you want to refinance it right away, they aren't going to do they aren't going to give any more value than what you purchased it at. But at this point, if you wait 6 months to a year and then refinance it, they will go on the appraised value. And then if you're an investor and it's a single family, they're probably going to give you 80% loan to value. If it's a duplex, probably 75% loan to value. Multi-unit, it would depend on your lender. So if you just get a no, my point is every lender sells their own thing.
And so you want to keep going. All the time. It's an ongoing changing market.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. I want my schedule to be booked up. I want to talk to you guys.
Can I grab one last question?
Sure.
On the on taxes. So just to try to avoid or lessen the capital gains tax, do you have any creative approaches to that for holding a property for a year, or just other ways to not take that big capital gains tax hit?
So So, and it's not a property that you live in?
Correct. It'd be an investment property.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The 1031 exchanges, you can't really touch the cash. You have to not touch any cash, and you have to have as much mortgage as you went out with. So, so it's a little tricky. If you have a lot of equity in something, and the only way not to pay the tax really is to do the 1031 exchange. And I use Starker Services. They went against the IRS originally. A lot of companies try and name their company Starker now. But the Starker, which their phone number is 1-800, let me see if I can type it. I want to type it in there. Louise, can you type it in there for me? 1-800-332-1031. And James is my guy. And so they actually went against the IRS, and the rules became clear. So they do a great job. They're out of California. And so you can't have mortgage debt relief, and you can't touch the cash. So you can sell one property and buy 5, which is what I did with those Dale properties, right? You can sell 5 properties and buy 1. It's called a like-kind exchange. You cannot sell a rental property and buy a business. You can sell property and buy land. That's like-kind again, although it doesn't have cash flow, right? But essentially what happens is Starker steps in, they sign some documents, the money is wired to them at closing. You have 45 days from the closing to identify the next property or properties, and then you have to own them within 120 days of the first sale. So it can be done if you follow the rule. If you break the rule in any way, you pay the tax. And so if you had a big equity stand and you really wanted at some of your cash, which is what we did. You heard my cash out refinance thing. That $750,000 was tax free because refinances are not a taxable event. But you don't want to refinance and take that cash out and then immediately sell the property. My accountant actually, if anybody ever needs a referral too, he will work with people in other states. He's in Minnesota. We go back to him. And so you want to do that a year before you're going to sell that property possibly, so that it's not in the same tax return and that kind of a thing, to be safe. Because if they think you refinanced it and then you did it, you took the cash and then you did a 1031, they're like, you took the boot out. That's not right. And you could fight with them 4 years later and lose. So, connect us to lenders who work with this in the past, even if, some lenders work in different states. And I have a few people who work in different states, depending on where you're at. If you give me an email or set up a time with me, that kind of a thing. My gal's retired now that I used forever, but I've got a smart guy, and we're always looking for great, smart people, like realtors, like doctors, like lawyers, Indian chiefs. Not everybody's created equal. So we're always looking for the great ones that can think on their feet. So if you have one.
Thank you. Yep.
Sure. Thank you. Tony, how can you have a mentor to get this started? Well, that's kind of what my terryandjason.com/apply is for. You know, maybe you'll check us out and decide you want us to mentor you. That's what we're about. That's why we do this. My dream, I've been doing this more local. I've been doing it with clients forever. And I'd had a big dream, and my big dream was, how can I do this more nationally, right? And something appeared on my phone last year, and it was a gal who wasn't in real estate. I didn't have somebody in real estate to teach me how to do this. And I took a course where they taught coaches how to work with people throughout the country. That's kind of how I found you guys today. And so now I figured that out. And my biggest concern was, how can I, because we were always told when we work with people, we were always told by our clients that the difference we were with other stuff they were doing was that we were very personal. And so
help them get into action.
Yes, and helping get them into action. And so then I hope we conveyed that today that we care. And we figured out how to help people wherever you are in the United States be successful with real estate. So we're in your ballpark. And so we can see if there's a way we can work together and make it extremely affordable to work with us. So I create a win-win strategy by far, way unlike anybody that I've heard of. So yeah. Awesome, you guys. Thank you for coming, and have a good evening. And thank you. Talk to you soon.
Give us a call. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.